Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Department of HDFE, Janki Devi Memorial College, I welcome all the participants to the ninth session of add-on course. It gives me immense pleasure to once again welcome Mr. Bhanu Kumar as a resource person for our session on storytelling. Mr. Kumar is a founder director, ARRA Associates, an industry veteran with close to 3 decades hands-on experience in automatic identification and data collection, data analysis, cloud infrastructure delivery. He is a technology expert, part of social forums, member diploma committee, faculty ISTD for diploma program. He's a mentor he mentors entrepreneurs, mentor for data science in upgrade, and he's also a social contributor. Well, I welcome you, sir, and I'll request you to initiate today's session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the intro. It's my pleasure to be coming back here again. So today it is going to be more in terms of storytelling. And once again, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I will probably get into the topic directly. All of us, I'm sure, love stories. We have been born and brought up with stories, right? So what I'm going to be doing today is just nudge you around in terms of those aspects by telling you what storytelling is and what is the impact it creates within us. I'll talk about why the storytelling has to be done. And there is something called a storytelling curve that we see in every story. So we will talk about that. And then we'll see how we can tell different types of stories and how can we succeed in being a good storyteller. Now, why are we bringing this as part of our life skill, or why are we bringing this as part of this course and all that? Now, today the world is moving towards a scenario where we are all looking at doing a lot many things, talking about a lot of things, succeeding in a lot of things, and there are challenges that will come up everywhere. Now, when we are into our workload, today, the corporate world is evolving towards what is called as storytelling for a lot of their selling, data storytelling, business storytelling. There are a lot of different ways in which people have started talking about a lot of these things. So, and story is not new to any of us, right from toddler stage till the time we become the grandparents. We are all used to stories. And I'm sure all of you will concur if I say we are all storytellers one way or the other throughout our life. I can imagine a smile in a lot of your faces, but that's exactly where we are going towards. So I thought it would be a good idea in terms of nudging you around those aspects. So coming back, that's one of the reasons why we thought we will formalize our capability, the storytelling capability, by bringing it up. I'm sure at least till the age of 10 to 12, a lot of people would have been enjoying when they hear these terms like once upon a time, long, long ago, one day, you know what happened. So all of this, if you really look at it, we are all used to this term very frequently. Even today, if somebody talks of saying long, long ago or during those days, all of us will start listening to him. I don't think there is anyone who will not listen to that person who says that. That's the power of storytelling that we are talking about here. I'm giving you 3 pictures here. You know, I always use the chat box heavily. So I want the crowd to, or the audience to keep interacting. So I want you to say one if you recognize the stories. If you don't recognize, it's fine. Nothing wrong. I will give you a moment, maybe a minute for you to recognize. One I have put in woodcutter and his axe, but there are 2 which talks about woodcutter. There is one more which is there. So I guess you are able to recognize these stories. Just put a 1 if you recognize, or just leave it. These are all childhood stories. Yes, I see a lot of 1 coming in. Thank you. So there are a lot of 1s coming in. So the first one, the woodcutter and his axe is, you're sitting on a wood and then cutting it off, you know what will happen. And what is the moral we try to take it here? All that what we say is don't dig your own grave. You'll have to do what you're looking at. Or in the second one, if you really look at it in this again is a woodcutter and an axe, but it's a story where the woodcutter gets all access except his, and he insists on getting only his back and did not take the gold or the silver or whatever that was given, which was finally handed over for his good deed. So there, if you look at it, what is the moral we are trying to talk about? Be truthful to what you are doing. You will get what you have to get as long as you're truthful to your work. This one is another, some of you may know it, some of you may not. This is a case where two friends go together to the forest. They hear a bear coming in. One knows how to climb the tree, so he climbs. The other does not know, so he drops onto the ground as if he is dead. That bear comes, looks at him and goes away. The story goes on after that, wherein the guy on the tree comes around and asks him, what did the bear tell you? And he says, the bear said, be friends with people who will be helpful to each other, not act as traitors and all that. So the moral is we'll have to be together. We are in a world where we have a dependency, all of us to live together, so on and so forth. A lot of those things come in. But why are we doing all this? Now, if you really look back, during our childhood, our grandparents, our parents were giving us a lot of stories. And what did they do out of that? They molded us to a particular kind of a behavior. There was always a moral to the story. There was an ending to the story, which was a happy ending, and we learned something out of it. The beauty is somebody tells us some story at the age of 3, some at the age of 5, some at the age of 7, at the age of 40 and 30 and 50 and 60. We remember those stories, we narrate it to the next generation. That's the beauty of storytelling that comes up. And just try to imagine if that is being used in an organization, business context, see the kind of success you'll come across. That's exactly what storytelling is all about. More importantly, that's exactly why storytelling is gaining so much of importance these days. I'm sure you'll all agree, none of these 3 stories were something that you heard about in the last 1 week or 10 days. It was all at least, if not more, 15 years back or 18 years back for most of you. Still, you are remembering it. That is the essence of storytelling. So having said that, I will quickly, you have already seen me last time. I will bring in videos here and there. So I've got a quick 3-minute video wherein there's someone who's going to be introducing you to what storytelling is. You will probably see a scenario and then he talks about certain aspects around storytelling. Watch this carefully. That will give you an introduction of what storytelling is. And then we will start from there on. So I am sharing the sound of the system also. Just in case you do not hear the sound, just put a 0 on the chat box. I will pause and restart. So let's watch the video.
Hey, Pete.
Oh, hey, Val.
How's it going?
You know what? I'm having a really bad day.
What happened?
See, what Val's saying when she says, what happened is, tell me a story. And that's actually what...
Hope it's audible, right? Volume is audible.
What this season of Pixar in a Box is all about.
Yes, it's audible.
To make a movie
Perfect.
here at Pixar takes years, but it all starts with a story. Humans have been telling stories since we could speak, probably even before. We tell stories around the campfire. We write plays, we write novels, short stories, we make movies, we take photographs, tweet to each other, the list goes on. The power of story is that it has an ability to connect with people on an emotional level. One of the things you hear all the time, this advice, is write what you know. Now, as a kid, I was like, I don't want to write about suburban Minnesota. That's boring. I want to write about explosions and monsters and car chases. Well, what that actually means is, yeah, go ahead and write about monsters and explosions and car chases, but put something into it that talks about your own life, how you feel. Do you feel scared? Do you feel alone? Something from your own life will make that story come alive and not just be a boring car chase. When I started directing Monsters Incorporated, the way I would pitch it is, it's about a monster who scares kids for a living. That's his job. He clocks in, he clocks out, he eats donuts and talks about union dues, and we thought that was a pretty funny idea. And sure enough, when I would tell it to people, they would smile. But when we told the story as a film, people started getting bored and restless, and they're like, I don't understand what this movie is about. Well, what I finally figured out was that it's actually not about a monster who scares kids. It's about a man becoming a father. And that was what was happening to me. So why write about what you know? Well, it's because probably what happened to you made you feel some particular way. And what you're trying to do really when you tell a story is to get the audience to have that same feeling. One of the big revelations for me telling stories is how much work they are, really. I always thought you'd just tell the story once and it would be perfect, and geniuses like Walt Disney or Miyazaki, this brilliance comes out of their head once and there it is. Well, the truth is, our stories don't always come out exactly perfectly the first time, or the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time, up to the 30th time. And so you keep going again and again and again, and only after retelling the story many, many times does it really sparkle. This season of Pixar in a Box is about how we at Pixar tell our stories, in hopes that it will inspire you to tell yours.
But seriously, what happened?
So the first thing, I get to my desk.
Okay. So basically, if you really look at it, there are multiple things. He beautifully starts it off. He says, I'm in trouble, and she immediately says, what happened? So that immediately makes us feel there is some story behind it. Oh, you had something coming up? Why don't you tell me? So that's exactly what he was saying. There was a story, people were telling it, and all that is fine. But somewhere I lost track of it. People did not like it. So a couple of points that came out there was, put yourself there, showcase your feelings. Now, those are very important. If you notice, multiple instances when somebody tries to sell a product, if they talk about it saying, I have used it, it works fine, versus you say there are so many people using it, you would always buy the option wherein they say, I have used it, it works fine. Is it not? You go to a shop to buy a clothing, or you go to a shop, let's say, to buy a refrigerator for your house, and the salesman says, no, I use this refrigerator, I've got it this way, this is what happens. Don't you feel like, in terms of, okay, he's making sense, he's using it, so maybe it will work. So that gives you a different perception. And that's exactly where storytelling is taking you through. So the biggest advantage of being a storyteller is in terms of you trying to get together in terms of a lot of things. First and foremost, it tells something. It will help us in informing something. Like the story itself, like what happened. So there is something that happened. So I am telling you. The second thing is, it will influence the people and make an impact. That's very, very important. Remember, he said, that's when I was realizing it is not the story of the monster moving around, but it's the story of I becoming a father, nurturing a kid and all that. So that's exactly where it comes in. So when you position yourself there, when you try to position yourself, that's when you will be able to empathize. All of us are used to this word empathy, right? Putting yourself into somebody else's shoes or other person's shoes. It's not going to happen unless and until that speaker makes an impact. And that's exactly where story helps you. The third angle is stories actually inspire people. Even today, given a choice, I know there are elders here and there are people, the college goers here. Even today, if somebody talks about a cartoon, say, let us say a Tom and Jerry, including some of the elders here, including yours truly, myself, we would drop everything and go watch Tom and Jerry if we have a choice. So there are a lot of things that come about in terms of it. Like even in the offices, if two people always argue, they are called Tom and Jerry. It's from time immemorial that comes in. So they are memorable, they inspire people, and in some cases, they also help in decision making. You know what? This is what happened to Bhanu when he was trying to do it last time. So maybe we need to be careful. Let's not take that route. Let us take a different route. So it helps you in decision making. And most importantly, each one of us can understand it very effectively and efficiently because we love stories. We give our fullest attention to listening to the stories, and we are part of the story. We will either be the hero or the heroine in the story, or bare minimum, a person who is feeling sorry about whatever is happening or happy about whatever is happening. That feel will automatically get in if you are a storyteller. So this is where a story makes a big difference. So shifting gears, if you are going to be a storyteller and you're supposed to go ahead doing it. Now, let's say, for example, you've been given a pen and you're supposed to be selling it. What can you say about a pen? All that you could probably talk about is it's a blue color or a black color refill. Refill is replaceable, non-replaceable. It is a ball pen or a whatever different types of pen that we talk about, where we get it, how common is it? That everybody will say, where are you different? Maybe you might want to start by saying pen is mightier than sword. And then you can probably give a story in terms of how by people writing on the letters to the editor or people writing a story or whatever, the life changed. And that is because of these kinds of pen. It is important for me to have it. While I've not narrated the story, I've given you a guideline. Just think a minute and then try to put a story to the particular pen that you want to sell and imagine where it goes. It definitely goes places much more than you normally talking about the features of the pen. Anybody will know the features of the pen. Logic is very simple. I have this slide here and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 text content that is given other than the logos and other contact details. If I'm just going to read the 7 points, versus I talk about the story and then relate it to the points that I have written, which one do you prefer? You don't need me if I'm going to read those 7 because you could read it offline, which means you as an audience, you are expecting a story behind these bullets. I, as a narrator, remember I'm calling as a narrator and not a speaker because I am going to be narrating stories to you. This is the human tendency, and that is exactly where we are trying to nurture it, nudge it, so that we take it to our advantage. So this is exactly where your storytelling concept comes in. This is where you are in terms of your storytelling. Am I making sense? A quick check, 1 for yes. And if you have questions, you can narrate your questions in the chat box. A quick 1 minute. Questions on the chat box or one stating you're clear. Thank you. For a moment, I thought storytelling made you folks drop off. Thankfully, no. All of you are there. Thank you very much for putting a 1 there. So the essence is, yes, stories are liked by all. We love it. We will be able to do it. Now, why are we liking it? While I want to give a detailed analysis around why we are liking it, this is a quick precursor to what I'm going to be talking about. Again, a quick 1 minute wherein it tells you what it does to the brains of yours. Let's watch this video and then I will explain what happens internally in us as to why we are all liking it. Let's go to the video now.
Listening to a good story lights up the same part of your brain as does pleasure. Stories excite neurons that make dopamine. Yes, dopamine. Stories stimulate the creation of oxytocin, a hormone known as the love drug. It enhances feelings of trust, empathy, and generosity. Exactly what you'd want at the start of a job interview, sales presentation, keynote speech, team meeting, address of the nation, or company-wide presentation. From the beginning of time, stories are how we have passed on our values, made sense of the world, and affected change. Today, it's how we influence our customers, our teams, and our audiences. And it's how we get better results.
So the essence is storytelling is enabling us to get better results because we are influencing customers, we are influencing people, we are influencing audience. Like I said, I am telling you a story. Now, the point that we'll have to understand, or that is what I'm driving at in today's session, is a story need not necessarily be a fiction. A story need not necessarily be a fiction. It is something that has happened, that is being narrated in a manner that the audience is able to relate well, feel the sense of belongingness within the story, empathize, and take action. Why is that happening? When I'm telling a story, my language improves. When I'm speaking, I'm using the language improves. I'm just not talking from a rote memory, but I'm actioning. It's a story. Now, if it is a normal speech, I don't have to use actions. But because it's a story, I use actions. So there is a movement. So the motor cortex starts working on it within the brain. The language is processed and I start listening. The narrator listens, the audience listens. Our listening skills improve. So unless and until we listen sharply, we will not be able to comprehend what is being said. While we are talking about it, there could be a lot of these colors that comes in, shape that comes in when you talk about a typical video story. But on a normal one, there are a lot of animations that come in. You could feel what is there, what we call as the cerebellum cortex sensory touch. You could feel it. You could probably relate and share your experience. Now, when I say, you know what, the other day when I was traveling to Bangalore from Delhi, it was a 2.5 hours flight. It was a late evening flight. It was supposed to land at 9:30. When I start saying it, yeah, I know I've traveled in that flight. I know that flight is pretty late in the dark there. So being Bangalore, if I'll have to get into the city after that, it takes a long time. I know what it means. So I'm able to relate, share my experience, talk. So that is exactly what happens when I make it a story. And I can emote my reaction. I can feel the pinch that comes in. What I mean by scent here is not necessarily the sensory in terms of smelling the scent, but it is in terms of feeling what we would have had and all that. And that's exactly where we talk about the dopamines, the cortisols, the oxytocin and all that. They are not rocket science. Those are terms that most of us are used to, but I will give you a quicker explanation here in terms of what is it. So after all that said, there are 4 distinct aspects that happens when I hear a story. The first and foremost is I start listening. Now, when I start listening, remember I talked about comprehension, right? So when I start listening, I also start comprehending it and start relating myself there. So I start looking at it so that you will share it. Oh, this is what he said. I would have done this. If he was going late night, I wouldn't have booked a taxi. I would have asked them to send a car. It's the same Bangalore travel that I'm talking about, or those kinds of things. So you start relating yourself and start narrating your thought process. This is what is called as a neural coupling. That is, you see you are part of that, which means you feel you are part of that story. You feel you are the man who's undergoing that. Now, when you get into that field, you automatically start experiencing what is being taught. So what happens is you start mirroring not the hero of the story alone, but with the speaker, because to you, the narrator becomes the hero of that particular story. So you start mirroring him and you start experiencing it. And that's why if you notice, even these days when we watch a movie or other things, especially old people watching some of these very probably sentimental scenes and all that, they will start reacting to it. They will start responding to it. That's because of this, because you start mirroring. You're staying here. No, don't do that, do this, and all that starts coming in because you're able to mirror to that. And there comes the dopamine. Basically, this is what helps you get emotionally charged up. So the moment you start mapping your emotions to the story, you will never forget it. Now, normally when you want to go to a place, you always go verify the landmark in those places, basing which you will do it, right? Because images will help. So you know the landmark, you're able to do that. So something similar is what happens, and that's where the dopamine comes into play. And last but not the least, the cortex activity. Now, this is very simple. You start processing the facts. When you start processing the facts, what will happen is it will start engaging so well that your entire brain will start working. See here, all aspects will start working if you are able to relate yourself well. So this is what happens to a story. Now, before I pause for your questions, I will add one more to it. Now, what does it have to do with the business? What does it have to do with me? Why are you telling me? Well, it's very simple. The thought process is very straight. All that what we are talking of here is, if I'm going to use this concept into selling, what am I trying to do? First step is neural coupling, which means you are trying to plant in such a way that the other side starts talking to what you are saying. They start mirroring you. They start feeling the emotions, and the other parts of the mind start activating. That's the 4 principles we talked about, right? The same thing on a selling. Don't you think it's a lot easy for us to convince the buyer to buy the product rather than trying to tell them the features alone? Zoho, for example, I know someone who's working in Zoho. She calls herself as a storyteller. She is actually a product architect, basically tries to talk about the features that goes into the product. She is also a UI UX expert, basically trying to understand the user experiences here, right? So now here, if you really look at it, why is she called a storyteller? When she meets the potential buyer, after all, we are selling a product. Now, let us say, for example, if you are selling this pen, all that what we are trying to do is we want them to use this pen for writing. So you start talking about typically you went there, this was not there, that was not there, so you're doing it. Or you're trying to sell a cheaper pen. So you're trying to say, see, if you have a costly pen, go to a bank, somebody asks for the pen and then you give it to them, you forget to take it back, you lose the pen, it's a costly pen. If it is a cheap one, 10 rupees, it is okay. So why don't you take 5 of them? Why don't you take 10 of them? You are so, this thing in terms of sharing it. So can we not do it? So those are some of the things that comes up. So when you try to look at it, when you are selling it through a story, the beauty that goes is you're trying to convince him better. How many times have you, when somebody tries to convince you, how many times have you said, oh, don't talk stories here, tell me the fact? So when you start listening to story, you get convinced because you're able to relate yourself and come in, and that's exactly where the essence of selling happens, through storytelling. So as I was telling about this girl who is in Zoho, she says, I talk to the prospects like a storyteller. I also talk to the existing users as storyteller. So she asked them, is everything going right? Did we understand your problem better? They start narrating a problem. She'll say, oh yeah, I understand what you mean. This is so sad, right? When you go this far, you're not able to take the report, though you have the data, it is not appropriate. Maybe I will have to make the correction. We will make the correction. So you're able to relate well with the audience, relate well with your potential buyers, relate well with your customers, whichever way you want. So that's the beauty of storytelling. So you're able to achieve it. Now I can hear somebody trying to loud think by saying, what is new here? Haven't people been telling stories to sell? There is nothing new. We are only ratifying what we have been doing. We have been telling stories to sell. Yes, that is an accepted norm. This is why we do this, is the message we are driving, right? Again, a pause here. If you have any questions, please put them on in the chat box. If you're clear, just put in a 1. Hope you are able to relate to where the storytelling gels in business and how we are able to do it. Feel free to type out a 1 or your question on the chat box. Thank you. So with this, one thing comes out clear. Yes, we all love stories. We are all storytellers, and it makes a big difference to us because the brain understands it well and we are able to do a lot of things very well. Fine, all that is excellent. So what? Why is this happening? How are we able to do? This is slightly a longer video, but she actually dwells into the details around the storytelling. And I would want you to look at it carefully and register the points that she's talking of in the this thing, because those are critical ones for us in terms of it. After this, I will probably get into what is storytelling curve, why is it that there is a curve, so on and so forth after this. But this gives you a precursor to that. Over to the video.
There's a Native American proverb that says, "The one who tells the story rules the world." Stories have the potential to be incredibly powerful. They're able to change how we relate to each other, to change prejudice. So the potential for stories to persuade is staggering. I read this really good research paper about these two books, which basically suggested that if you get people to read a couple of chapters of Harry Potter, they'll rate themselves higher than other people in their ability to potentially move something just using the power of their mind. The people who read about the vampires, they'll actually believe that their teeth are slightly longer than other people in the population, just as a result of having read a chapter or two of this book. In terms of psychology, there's a few things that stories actually do to us. We get this sense that we're fully immersed in the world that we're reading about.
Would you like to come on an adventure?
And we start to almost feel as if the things that are happening to them are happening to us.
Reading is not a relaxation. You are building worlds. You are populating those worlds with cities, and those cities you are populating with people. So although television, film, theatre all have their place in the storytelling world, to me that moment of contact with a book, when you read a story and unlock its secrets, nothing quite comes close.
Our research has been on the meaning of individual words. If you read the word jump, for example, you activate those areas that you also activate when you do actually perform the action of jumping. So that would be about here somewhere. The interesting question in this case, of course, is, if you read about somebody else jumping, why should you activate brain areas related to jumping? The proponents of the theory would say that immersing yourself into a story is based on the mirror neuron system. I am convinced that mirror neurons are part of this process, but it can't be the whole story.
It's been found that when we connect with people who aren't real but are fictional characters, it forms a sort of social surrogate for us. It's almost like they're a real person when they're not. And psychologists sometimes call it forming a parasocial relationship. And what's interesting about that is it kind of makes us feel less lonely. And it can also buffer self-esteem and improve our mood. We know that having a lot of friendships with other people when you're in a couple is a really positive thing for the outcomes of that relationship. But what's really interesting is they don't have to be real people. If you're trying to change people's opinions about controversial topics such as same-sex marriage or immigration, for example, stories have actually been found to be a lot more effective in producing political change. Attitudes towards stigmatised groups could be improved by reading Harry Potter, but only if the person identified with Harry.
Children love stories. They always have a story to tell, whether it's about the weekend or what happened in the playground. And it's such an important part of understanding the world around them and understanding themselves.
You should definitely turn this off right now and go and pick up a book.
Okay, I take her word, so I switch it off here. But the point that we are trying to drive here, if you look at it, see, you become somebody when you're reading it. So people who are reducing on their prejudice on immigrants, somebody reads a Harry Potter, so on and so forth, gives you the clarity of what I was talking about on the mind game. So when you're telling stories, there is a lot that you could do. You could make them. See, the point is, we will talk about how to be a successful storyteller later on. But the point that you need to keep in mind is, not everybody can tell any kind of a story. The key is, if you need to be successful, you need to pick the right kind of a story that will relate to the right chunk of people who are there, without which it's not going to be helpful. Now, if you're going to sell a pen and you're going to talk about Ramayana for it, where was pen during Ramayana days? It's not going to gel. So if you're going to talk about a pen selling and you're going to you are wanting a story, you could probably talk about an emotional situation where you went to an yeah. Yeah. Am I audible? Anything? Somebody was calling me? Or was it a crosstalk? I am audible, right?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah, okay. Somebody said, sir, so I thought it was for me. Okay. So as I was saying, when you're going to talk about the selling of a pen, you should probably talk about what happened. There's someone who says I'm not audible. I think I'm audible for everybody. Priya, if I'm not audible for you, maybe just log out and log in once more. I hope I'm audible for the others, right?
Yes, sir.
You're on.
Okay. So Priya, you may want to log out and log in once. I'll be audible. Maybe more it is in your end. Okay, coming back. So from a pen story, if you want to sell a pen and you're trying to tell a story, probably one angle could be in terms of what happened when you went without a pen to an exam, or what happened when you gave a pen to someone who asked for it and then how did it break or whatever, rather than talking about a Ramayana, right? So that's exactly what we need to understand. That's the essence. Now, second point that came out here is we try to relate ourselves to a lot of stories that come in, which means it's really, really important for you to pick the right kind of a story or build the right kind of a story related to the product. So now let's take the Zoho thing and all that. Now, if they are trying to sell a product, all that what we need to talk about is your problem should be related to that. Like what I've been telling, selling a pen. I want to write something and I want to be independent of it. I don't want to lose it. So you'll have to build a story around that. You cannot talk about traveling by air, traveling by train and all that for a pen. But what is important is writing. How critical is it for you to write? And how do you write on it? What type of pen? What color? So those are important. So pick the relevant ones for you to do that. Now, before I get into it. So how many of you read books or listen to stories even today? Those of you who are reading books or listen to stories or whatever it is, just type out in the chat box what type of books you read or what type of stories you listen to. Can you quickly put that? That will probably tell us how many of you are still related to stories. Fiction. Non-fictional. There are only 2 out of 90 odd who are reading books. 104 in fact, or science fiction. That's likely. Non-fictional, motivational. So each of us talk about it. Now let's pick Simran's motivational. Why is Simran picking motivational? Gets motivated out of it. Why is somebody reading non-fiction? Because they feel fiction are not realistic. Non-fiction may be realistic. So each of us have a reason. But the point I'm driving there is you are actually relating yourself to the story, and that is why you're picking that kind of a story. That's very important. And that is the essence of storytelling that we have been talking about here all along. And remember, even one line can be a story. Yes, I like Steve Jobs. Even last time I had put in a video about Steve Jobs. Here is one more. He is an excellent motivator. In fact, there are a lot of things that you can learn out of Steve Jobs, but let's not get into that and digress. But stay hungry, stay foolish, said by Steve Jobs, to me is a story. Even one line can be a story, in my opinion. Those of you who agree, say 1 in the chat box. Those of you who don't agree, say why you don't agree. So majority are saying 1 to it. Okay, a lot of people, Anshu, Suparna, Sundarabharati, Sanskriti, Shalu, a lot of you are saying 1 to it. Can anyone tell me what could be the story here by typing it out there? What is the story Steve Jobs is talking about here? Stay hungry, stay foolish. All of you said 1. Can anyone tell me what could be the story here? Is it because it's Steve Jobs or is it because I said? Yeah, go ahead.
So by hungry, it can, they can mean here, don't limit yourself to things. Desire for more, like grow, desire for growth, for changes. So stay hungry for that. Like once you've achieved one of your goals, start working on the other. To grow, be it uh, as a in the job aspect or intellectually or whatever. And stay foolish might be, you can make mistakes and learn from them.
Makes sense, Vidhi. Good point, Suparna. Also, both of you are more or less talking semantics here. Willingness to learn and not fear defeat. Now, technically, a one-liner may not be a story. When you go deep, that's why I quoted about Steve Jobs there. If you really look at Steve Jobs, he was one man who founded an organization. He was later sent out of that organization. And yeah, want to be ready to try new things is another way of putting it. Hungry, don't want more and more in life. Yes, these are options that you could get into. Those of you who follow Steve Jobs will realize that this is a long, deep statement of his. He was the one who founded an organization. Later on, he was sent out of that organization by the board of directors. He did not know what he should do. And then he decided to start another organization. And over a period of time, that organization and the organization from where he was sent out merged, and then he again became the owner of the original organization from where he was checked out. This wouldn't have been possible had he not had the hunger to learn. Yeah, being hungry and foolish opens the scope to achieve more. Yes. Had he not been hungry to learn, or had he not gone deeper into learning things, he will not be able to. So these one-liners also make a lot of huge stories there. So the reason why I'm bringing it up, I'm not saying use a one-liner to sell, but use these one-liners as a punch if you think the audience knows you. People know Steve Jobs. You go read Steve Jobs' biography, you go read Steve Jobs' stories, or you go listen to Steve Jobs' videos, you will know how much he has suffered and how he was successful till the end. And more importantly, look for his video, Learn to Say No in YouTube. You'll realize he said no to a successful business of his, dropped it, and focused on Apple to make Apple what it is today. There was a successful business running through. He dropped it like a hot potato and said, okay, I'm no longer going to concentrate on that, and concentrated. So learning to say no is also important, is what he says. So long story short, yes, that's a famous punchline that we use, right? Even in a scenario like this, where I'm trying to give you some concepts, when I'm answering some questions, I say long story short. That's the effect of story. We are all storytellers. We love listening to stories, and we are now using it to enhance our capabilities. So that's where we are coming in. Now, having seen this, just look at this. I'm now getting into the detailing on the story. Now, I know this is a small image, but I think it is clear enough to tell you what is this story about. This is a very well-known story. Can anyone put it on the chat box? What is the story all about? No gifts? Yes, Ramayana, you're right. Excellent. So, yes, it's a Ramayana. See, that's a huge story. If you know it, it starts off with something and ends elsewhere. It talks about the life of Rama, the life of Rama's children, in between Sita, bits and pieces on Bharata, Lakshmana. There is talk about Dashrath and all those things. But the essence is, we are not missing out anything. But the point that I'm trying to bring about here is this. There is this ordinary world. So this is a typical hero journey. Any story you pick, you will have this flow. This circular flow will always be there. Watch it. Ordinary world. So if you really look at it, yes, Dashrath was ruling the kingdom, and you had Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, all these people were happily going through, things were moving on, everything was fine. Then you have the call to adventure. Well, pardon me, I'm not going to talk about the Ramayana story here, but I'm trying to link it to the points here. So the call to adventure, that is where there is this Kaikeyi talking about some of the requests in terms of Rama to go on exile. There is a refusal, and then Rama goes on exile. He has his mentor. He helps them out. They are moving around in terms of it. there are enmities coming in. You're talking about a lot of enmities, the various ways Ravana is trying to get into it. Then you are probably moving into realizing all those facts, understanding what is it, and then go back, fight it out, and get back what has been lost. And then you come back and then start ruling the kingdom. So if you really look at it, there was a call to adventure. From an ordinary world into refusal of the call is the call to adventure. That is, there was something adventurous. What is it in Ramayana? Rama going on an exile. Then there is a supreme ordeal and initiation. So you argue mentally, mental trauma, try to figure out, and finally you agree because there's no other choice. You go on the exile, where you meet your mentor, then you learn a lot, you initiate saying, you start realizing this is what is your world going to be. So you start doing it. That is when you start transforming yourself. And that is when you have the enmities and all that who are there. You're learning to agree. You're fighting with them. Get to the road back so that the hero returns to start ruling. Now, what is the message I'm driving? There was something that was going normal. It fell flat in between. So you had to make some course corrections. And then you started climbing up. And thereon, you lived happily ever after. Now, this was Ramayana as an example. But pick any story of your liking, including your Tom and Jerry, to your Popeye show, to whatever that you're talking about, whichever ones you love, you pick anything, Archie's to anything. It will always follow the cycle of call to adventure, supreme ordeal initiation, unification, transformation, and road back or hero's return. This is a common formula. Now you know why storytelling is important, but not very complicated. Anybody can write stories. Now look at a movie or look at what has happened in your real life. Everywhere that is what happens. Everything is going normal. Then suddenly there is this virus that is coming up. Then we are not agreeing to it. We say it is an aberration. And then we realize, yes, it is a COVID virus. We'll have to be careful. So you start getting into it. You cross this threshold step by step. You test. There are enmities that are running in. You work it out. You approach. You try to take corrections. You say, okay, things are reducing. Can I go back? Phase 2 comes in. And then what you do, you're trying to figure out why it is happening, come about with a vaccination, and then you're trying to go back to the normal self with that extra care. So you pick any scenario. This is what goes in. And this is the same cycle a story follows. Every story starts with a call to adventure, ends with the hero returning to a normal life. Is it not what we see in Shah Rukh Khan's movies? Is it not what we see in Amitabh's movies? That's exactly what storytelling is all about. Do we just stop with that, or do we understand what goes beyond it? That's where the effectiveness of storytelling comes in. So when I use it for a movie, my end goal is to get a box office collection. But when I use it for selling, my end goal is my product has to be sold. When grandparents tell us the Ramayana, the end goal is to make us live an ethical life, which is away from unnecessary, wrongful doings and all that. So the goal is achieved, but it has its own ups and downs before we achieve. This is a typical cycle of a story. Any story you pick, it goes through this cycle. Am I making sense? Is it clear? Anybody, everybody, anything at all here? One for agreeing to it. You can probably put in your question if you are not clear. Thank you, Sundara Bharati. Okay, thanks. There are a lot of people who are saying one. Yes, so I am happy. Yes, it is making sense. So now we will move on. The next step. This is what I explained in the earlier slide. This is what is called as a storytelling curve. You have a character. There is an environment for that character. Everything is fine, but there happens an incident. So this character has a goal. There is a motivation that is recognized by the audience. The character is bubbly, the character is doing something, everything is fine, but there comes this incident. So you get a villain coming in. So with a villain coming in, what happens? There is a struggle. There are conflicts, problems, risks. danger, and you get into crisis, the black moment. And somewhere the heroism comes in, our hero flies all over, the climax comes in where the rescue happens, and then he tries to resolve it and returns home with a little more change in his life in terms of what is happening. He has changed now. He has matured enough to understand what is what. This is a typical storytelling curve. You look at Ramayana, that is what happens. Now, what is the incident for Mahabharata? The game between Yudhishthira and Duryodhana. So, anywhere you go, there is an incident which changes. Tom and Jerry. There again, if you notice, the cat has to catch the mouse, and typically they are friends when everything is fine, but when they are alone, they start doing it. So there is always this incident. You pick anything, there is an incident. Now, on your real life, why is someone coming to buy something? Why is someone coming to you to buy something? There is an incident. There is a need. So it is up to you to use it to your advantage. Now, that does not mean when you enter probably a clothing shop and you're buying a shirt, you are expecting a story to come out of the seller there. He talks about he wearing that shirt and going, you will not buy it after that. That's not what I mean. What I mean is when you're selling your products, in your business, when you're going through and all that, it's really, really important that you make it a point in such a way that the audience is able to relate with you and emote the same emotions that you have and mirror you so that they will do what you want them to do, and that is buying the product. That is where the business storytelling comes in handy. I'll pause here. Is it making sense? So this is the typical curve. I'll give you a minute. Think of any story that you like or the story that you love the most. Try to see whether it maps to this curve. It will map. If for someone it does not map, you can put your thought in the chat box and I can relate to that and probably give you a clarity. But a minute to you, think through, it will definitely map. Yes, Mita, it will always map. No wonder our movies have heroes and villains, right? You need that kind of an incident to happen, the villain to come in, the villain to argue or whatever, and then it goes in. So that's exactly what storytelling is all about. So how do I develop a story? How do I succeed in building a story? This 6 steps will help you succeed in building a story. First thing, set a character, context setting. Set a character who has a goal in a particular setting. Now, let's probably talk about a very simple one. Let's take a simple thing wherein if I am expected to introduce myself through a story, the character in this is going to be me. The goal is the audience should know me. Okay, fine. So this is my context setting. Second is I need to have an incident. Now, something that happens and the story continues. Now, if I'm introducing myself, if I'm a trainer full-time, something happened in my life so that I'm becoming a trainer. If I was not a trainer full-time, somewhere I become a trainer. Something happened. So I have to build that incident, bring that incident to the forefront, and more importantly, deliver it in a fashion that the audience are able to get the same emotions that I have and they are able to mirror me. Now, for me to do that, I will bring in a crisis. So the character will undergo some struggles. There are some conflicts, problems, risks, and the story reaches a crisis point. So when I introduced myself, I said last time also, I was saying I was working. Later on, I came into consulting. I also do give back to society kinds. So I'm trying to be a trainer. I'm trying to relate to a lot of things. Now, what made me think about quitting a job that was giving me a good salary? Some incident. Now, what happened of that? After that, obviously, it was not rosy. I did have to undergo some bends, troughs, peaks, everything before I really stabilized. So why did I take it? Because I was passionate. Remember, we talked about passion last time. So my passion was to give back to society. So I was ready to. So there is a struggle. but the life moves on. And then comes the climax. Yes, I got into this kind of a storytelling mode. So I started talking about it. So I started liking it. People started writing. So I started becoming a trainer par excellence. People started recognizing me. So they were empathizing with me after this point. That's the climax. And then my problems are resolved because I become a brand. Bhanu is known as a brand. So they know if there is something required, Bhanu will be able to do it. So Bhanu comes back to where he was and starts continuing what he does. So this is exactly where it is. The reason why I picked this is I kind of did an exercise wherein in 5 minutes, I had to introduce myself, wherein I had to introduce myself in a fashion wherein I started off as a salaried employee with a vision, but finally today I'm going to give back to society. How did that happen? I actually have a video of that introduction. Probably if time permits, I will play it for you, but that's why I picked it. The way I tried to build it was I built in these 6 steps into set a context wherein I said, yes, I wanted to be a happy-go-lucky man, try to earn more, survive and all that. Then something happens. I start going to the colleges, people are interviewed and all that. I realize college students need some guidance because there are a lot of opportunities. So I realize people are not able to achieve. So I start giving some examples there. And then I start empathizing and then I move into, so that's how I try to build the story and talk about it. So this is how you will prepare. So coming back to our business line, when I want to talk about a story for the business selling, I need to build a story this way. This is what I said. Anybody and everybody cannot generally make stories. He will be found out. What is important is to relate it and build it to the way that is required for, right? Before I get into different types of stories, a quick pause for you to probably digest what has happened till now. So we try to understand what is storytelling, what is its impact on us, mind, body, soul. And then we talked about the story curve. And then we talked about how do we develop ourselves so that we are able to achieve. So is everything sinking in well? Are you all clear? Any questions, comments, anything at all that you want me to repeat? One for all clear, or your questions, doubts on the chat box. So far, I think I've been telling stories, no major doubts so far. But if there is any questions, you can probably bring it up here. Looks like things are fine, no questions. So now I will get into types of storytelling. I'm going to talk about some key types of storytelling, but there are multiple different types. Now that you know what storytelling is, again, let me jump and say there is no right or wrong. Now that you know what storytelling is, can anyone try to say what are the different types of stories that you have heard or you can probably bring in? Anything at all? And let me warn you, it is not going to be fiction, non-fiction. The types of storytelling are not fiction, non-fiction. Look at it from a business perspective. What are the different ways in which people try to tell stories? First person narrative, inspirational story, historic.
Adventurous stories.
Adventurous stories, okay.
Humorous stories. Stories
Humorous
make
stories.
you laugh.
Right.
Now, scary ones. Fairy tales.
Fairy tales, fables.
Yeah,
yes.
fables.
So there are a lot of things. Now, coming back to relating it into the business. Now, while these are things that we know of from a pastime perspective, from a business perspective, there are different types. I will relate whatever types you said now here with these. The first type, what we call as a hook, meet and payoff. Now, all that it means is, now remember, you are here to sell, right? When you're trying to sell, you should ensure the audience are able to relate with you and understand what you're doing so that they will do what they want you to. Now, for a moment, let's forget the business selling. You're seeing me for the second time. I've come in last week. I've come in this week. Now, how did I start? It typically started with a question. So I am giving you a sense of what is coming in. So I build the anxiety in you to realize what is in store. While I can give a session plan, that's just a text that I have typed. But I start with a question. Once upon a time, long, long ago, one day, Are you able to relate? Give you some story pictures and say, are you able to relate? Last time when I came in, I said, what's your passion? So when I'm going to talk about a topic and I ask you a question related to that, this guy is supposed to explain it to us. Why is he asking a question? You become inquisitive. So I hook you. What happens after that? You will start listening to me. That's where the meat comes in. I will organize the presentation in such a manner that you will be able to follow it along and relate yourself into. Right? So the meat comes in. Now, the reason why we call it meat is now that you got the audience hooked on, start pumping in the data that you want to provide so that the audience gets the feel of what you want them to do. That is, if you're selling it, give them a lot of details as to why that. Let me take the same pen example, or let me talk about the flight going late from Delhi to Bangalore or whatever. Start loading out a lot of facts and figures in terms of it. So they start relating now, what is he up to? There you bring in the payoff. What is the call to action? What do you want the audience to do? That time presenter saying, that is why I'm saying you need to get a pen, or that is why you need to take this. Now, the same training example, what is the call to action that I end with? I actually end with a question, if everything is clear or if you have anything, but more importantly, the summary in terms of saying, what is the purpose of the session and how do you do it? So that's what you take it back, because the last you learned, you take it back. So this is a case where I'm doing a storytelling for a training, but that was an example that I used, but you could probably use it for your product selling, for your service selling, for your concept selling, for your research paper selling. If when you're talking about research, when you're writing a concept paper there, you'll have to talk about the literature paper and then you have a discussion and then the conclusion. All of it is hook it up. Why are we talking about the initial introduction in any document? We are hooking it up by giving the background. And then we give the meat of it in the literature review and then we get into it. So this is how we try to do it. So this is one method. Now coming back, we were talking about humor stories, horror stories. We were talking about inspirational stories, first person narratives, fables, historic. Pick everything. Now, if I'm going to tell you tell a moral to the child, I will probably take a Ramayana or probably a Panchatantra story. All of us are used to that. At least I don't know how many of the current trend, the so-called millennials, the Gen Zs are used to. Some of the elders here will recognize Panchatantra, Kalia the Crow to the Lion King to whatnot. The key point that we are trying to look at there is we are trying to tell a moral. Now, if today's children do not like that, I have seen a lot of people who use the same story, but given a different twist of the character and then start doing it. So the point is historic, inspirational, fable, horror story, whatever it is. Now, where to pick what? Now, I will probably use a horror scenario when I'm talking about landing late in the night in Bangalore and then driving down into the city. So I'll probably talk about a horror instance and then I will probably do it. Or I will talk about an inspiration if I'm going to tell, or probably in these kinds of scenarios where part of the training is also to motivate you into getting into those kinds of life skill things so that you are succeeding. So I will probably build in inspirational stories. I will talk about a lot of those inspirations that comes in and all that. So there is a lot of planning that you have to do. But after you have planned, 3 distinct steps. First step is hook the audience to you. They will not go away from you. Then land on them like a thud with the meat and finally summarize it with a payoff. This is why even training or presentations, people talk about how are you going to start? How are you going to end? What is the content? How long are you going to take? So all this is really important so that we will be able to achieve it. So this is one type of a business storytelling called hook, meet, and payoff. Is it making sense? Any questions, anybody? Anything at all there? Is it all clear there? Okay, the next one that we are going to talk about is another interesting methodology that we are talking about here, wherein here you will probably get into a next level. You will probably get into a next level wherein you're talking about rags to riches. You're talking about rags to riches. What is rags to riches? You are starting off maybe a pauper, but ultimately you are a big multi-dollar, billionaire, millionaire, whatever you want to call. That's a rag to riches kind of a story. Now, where will that come in? What does that mean? Now, a good example of rags to riches stories is your Aladdin story. How many of you remember Aladdin and the lamp? That's a perfect story of rags to riches. Now, what is rags to riches talking about? You are having tough times, then you get an opportunity which is not normal. So that will enable you to overcome the adversity, and then you live happily ever after. So if you really look at the Aladdin example, he is homeless, generous guy who aspires more in life, but he is actually homeless. So he's having a tough time. So he gets an opportunity. What is the opportunity? He gets the magical genie after being kidnapped by Jafar and all that storyline there. So he gets the magical genie. What does he do to handle that? He uses the genie to destroy Jafar and probably marry Jasmine, the princess, right? So the Aladdin and Jasmine are back, who are able to restore the kingdom. So rags to riches. You are nobody, now you are the kingdom there. Now, how do you relate it into a business scenario? Remember the Zoho company that I was talking about? Cinderella is a beautiful example. You're right, Nita. So remember the example that I was talking about, Zoho products and all that. Now, when you're selling a product, you're trying to position yourself saying that product is critically important for you. So all that what you're going to talk about there is, you will have to give the scenario, the tough times, what will happen without the product. Then you talk about the opportunity. See, here is where the product comes in. So what will happen with the product? You can do this, you can do that, you do this, you get this kind of report, you get this kind of analysis. So you should buy it. And that's when you buy it. So that's a kind of story where you're talking about rags to riches. So this is another way. Now relating it back to our historic, to your fable, to your inspirational, to your horror, it's a kind of scene that comes in. Ultimately, the essence is this: I can put in whatever type of scene that I want. You can, rags to riches can also be a ghost story. So all that matters is, here was a case where Aladdin was a case where he met a genie, which is a kind of a ghost, but it was a good ghost. So those are some of the ways that you could probably look at it. But this is another example of a storytelling, rags to riches. This is another way in which you will narrate your story. Now, sometimes what will happen is, forget these kinds of storytelling. Sometimes you will also land up into a scenario wherein you will see what is referred as a 4-step leader story. Now, when you get into a business, this comes in 4-step story. You will have to do a selling of a product, but you have not met this person. So you say, who am I? What is my connection with the organization? Why am I here? And then what is in it for you, right? So that's another kind where you will probably get into. Now, that will probably be monotonous when you say, hi, I'm Bhanu Kumar, I'm from Ara Associates. The reason why I'm here is to talk about the storytelling, the concept behind it, the content behind it. I've already lost you. I've already lost you. So what is in it for you? When I come to that, I've already lost you. You're not going to listen to me, which means my sale is not done. Whereas you come back saying, the other day when I was traveling the train, I met, and probably somebody who gave your contact, I gave that person's name. When I was traveling the train, I met Ram, who happens to be your head of technology. I was talking to him casually as a casual train chat. And that time he was talking about the instance that is happening in the incident that was happening in your organization, wherein there was some issue in terms of the data loss. Incidentally, because I'm a subject matter expert and I am into it, he suggested that I meet with you. You see the difference in the way we introduce. Are you able to relate the difference? The first one, even before I come into what is in it for you, the seller has lost the buyer, potential buyer. But in the second case, talk about somebody who was a common friend, talk about the incident that happened in their organization, tell them it so happened because I'm a subject matter expert, Ram suggested I come and meet you and help you out on it. So you don't even have to worry. What is in it for you comes in automatically. I'm going to help you out resolve a problem. So introducing someone itself is a great way of writing stories or reading stories or whatever you want to call. And it's really, really important that you understand what you are doing for you to achieve. Right? So this is one other way wherein you could probably get into storytelling. So technically, there are multiple different ways wherein you would probably get into storytelling, but this is one way. So this is what, when typical communication experts talk about, they tell you the first 2 minutes is important, first 3 minutes is important. Why do they say that? See my introduction when I was giving. When I was giving, I'm so-and-so from so-and-so company, I've lost you. But when I said I met Ram from your organization who happens to be the CTO of your company, oh, he met CTO, so he's coming through a CTO reference. There must be something in him. So let me listen to him. That's the difference. That's why we say the first 2 minutes is important. And if you notice, most speakers whom you love as excellent speakers, they always start with a story. They always start with a story because the hook concept comes in there. With that story, I'm hooking the audience and then I'll get into it. But that story will not be general story. It will probably relate it. Like it will be at minimum, if I start a session late, I will give you a story. It's like I get into the class, I come in late, I talk about a vehicle tire puncture. Something similar, I will bring in something. It is a story. So let me reiterate what I said in the beginning. All of us are storytellers. How we tell the story is what differentiates us from one another and helps us in building the call to action better, right? The third type of storytelling that I want to talk about is what we call as a situation opportunity resolution. Now, currently what is happening? Give an unbiased view of the current conditions. That is your situation. Then you talk about an alternative opportunity that will help them overcome the situation. And finally, propose the product you are giving. This is a perfect sales pitch that you do. Situation opportunity resolution. Now, when somebody comes and gives you the features of the product, you are generally not so enthused to buy it. When somebody narrates a scenario, somebody tells you in terms of these are places where you'll come across a challenge. Now, let's say somebody is trying to sell the electric stove that is coming up, power thing and all that. So he will always start with the saying, see, currently the prices of the gas is increasing. There is a limitation in the number of gases that are coming in. What if there is a scenario where you have to do it and you don't even know how long the gas is going to be there? Weight losses and all that could be there. You'll have to keep checking it. There are subsidies, but so you will talk about the situation. But remember, the key is that what you are stating must be unbiased. It cannot be biased. And then he talks about an alternative part. So opportunities, because of all this, there are multiple ways in which why do you have to depend on somebody giving you the subsidy? Why do you happen to depend on waiting for the gas to come? What if there is a delay in gas and all that? And then propose a solution. Why not you buy this electrical stove? You have power at home. This does not take anything beyond your the same 5 amp plug point. Connected, it starts working. You pay through your electricity. This is available whenever you want. It does not overheat. It has a time of setup, blah, blah, blah. So you start with the situation, identify an opportunity for you to sell and sell the product. This is a good example of situation opportunity resolution model. And very often we use it for the branding story, where we talk about us and then our vision, the turnaround, the culture and all that. When we talk about these kinds of brand stories, we will start talking about some of these things, wherein we talk about who we are, what we do, how we do, those kinds of things, whenever you want to brand it. Qualities of a storyteller should have as a team leader. I'll come to that, NCB sir. The qualities are very simple. The biggest quality is for you to narrate what you want, for you to identify the kind of story that you want to give, that related to the situation, build it. So the key is for you to remember this. Key is for you to hook, meet, and pay off. So you are trying to be, when you're a team leader, you're trying to make the team work for you. That's your payoff. So you want them to do a big chunk of work. So you hook them. How? Help them out in doing things, build it, be one among them, be a coach, be a mentor, be one among them, do it. If they say they can't do it, help them doing it. but ultimately get into it. So, but that's a typical quality of a team leader. So as a storyteller, what happens? You will have to narrate the scenarios wherein, remember what all I said initially, you will probably start off, I started as a team member here, but it just took only probably 18 months before which I was given a team leader, because I did this, did that, all this went well. Make them relate into it. So typically, I don't want to call it as a team leader kind of a quality, team member kind of a quality and all that. Storytelling is a quality everybody should have, irrespective of what role.
Is it an experiencing storyteller? Experiencing storyteller?
Not really, sir. Basically, if you really look at it, in the beginning, I was talking about it, what a storytelling is and all that. Basically, all that what we are trying to do is we are making a story which is going to help in deciding. We are trying to make an impact in terms of what you want. So you could probably state and narrate an experience and then tell them, this is why I bought it, you bought it. Or basically, it comes down into the 6. Set the context, build an incident, see how it goes about. So the point that we are trying to do here in terms of storytelling is very simple. All that what we are trying to do here is, let us say you want to sell a product or sell your concept. So when you're selling your concept, you will have to go step by step, but don't make it look like trusted on them. So build a story, build an incident, take a scenario, and then take it up. Now, suddenly, for example, you have developed something halfway through and suddenly you're changing the course. Don't tell them you'll have to change it because they'll feel let down. So tell them they have done wonderfully. These are things going right. These are things going wrong, but this can be worked out. And then bring in an incident wherein you say, you know what, we have done everything. Like we were going through the training, we were structuring this course. Everything was going fine. We had done the schedule. We have sent you the invite and all that. And then you say, bring in an incident. We put it between mid of September to mid of October, but in between we have the festival holidays coming in. So there were 2 days that were lost. So we cannot end it on this. So you're moving it. So the point that is being driven is storytelling should be a way of your communication. I do not want it to be called as a quality, capability, and all that. That is how you will have to communicate. We are all storytellers. We communicate in a manner that everybody will relate to what we are saying and achieve it. So with that said, I will probably put in this video, which will kind of tell you what is required to be a successful storyteller. And then I will get into the next aspect. Quick peep into the video.
Many years ago, I was speaking at an internet marketing conference, and it was a 2-day conference. We had a group of amazing speakers, and I was actually the first speaker. I was first speaker in day 1. And after my presentation, I sat down, front row seat, kind of VIP sitting at the front, and I would just pay attention and take notes. And the second speaker came up on stage, and about halfway through his presentation, I stood up and walked towards the very back of the room. And people thought, is Dan leaving? Is he going back to his hotel room? Which could be the case because a lot of energy in the first segment, right? When it's during my speech. But that was not the case. I was actually walking towards the back to sign up for the speaker's education because he had an offer that he was talking about. Now, no one moved. I was the first one to move. And the staff was asking me, well, Dan, you don't know what the offer is yet, right? I said, it doesn't matter, just here's my credit card, put in my credit card. He said, but you don't even know how much it is yet. You don't know, is it a workshop? Is it like a group of DVDs? What kind of package? Is it a book? You know what it is? I said, it doesn't matter, just put in my credit card. And he did. After he finishes filling the form and everything, right? I walked back, sat down, front row seat, taking notes again. And I did the same thing for the third speaker, fourth speaker, and the rest of the speakers that day. I bought everybody's education. And at the end, one of the staff couldn't help. He said, Dan, I don't understand. Like, why are you investing and buying all these courses? Like, don't you teach into the marketing? I mean, you're an expert on this subject. I mean, look, I saw your presentation. I saw your screenshot. I mean, you make millions of dollars online. Like, why are you buying all these courses? I looked at him as a reply. I said, duh, how do you think I get to be successful? Because I invest in myself, right? I'm always investing in myself. I'm always looking for the edge. So how do you tell good story? There is a story.
Let me give you 3 secrets today. When it comes to storytelling, one of the best way to draw people in is not just telling them, hey, you should do this, you should do that, and you should listen to me, and this is what you must do. A much more powerful way, more persuasive way to do it is to share the same lesson, but in a story. So, 3 keys. First secret is time and location. With any good story, you notice a lot of fairy tale starts off with what? Once upon a time. Once upon a time. So if you can take the viewer, you can take your audience to a place, a time and place when this happens, and you want to be very specific. You don't just be like, okay, you know, that kind of happened so many years ago. No, you want to kind of take them to that place. You want to kind of set the tone and set the stage. So in the beginning of my story, I share with you, many years ago, I was speaking at an internet marketing conference. So I want to create that mental image. Oh, you can visualize, imagine me on stage and speaking to a large group of people, right? That's setting the stage, time and location. Number 2 is you want to be very specific in your story. I like to use dialogues because dialogues are so powerful in storytelling. It pulls the readers, you put the reader right, the listener, the reader right into the middle of the scenario. Put in a comment, how many of you could visualize me talking to someone in the back of the room about the incident, about what happens, right? He was asking me questions. So dialogues immediately puts your listener right in the middle of the action. Very powerful thing to do. And number 3, just with any good story, right? Secret number 3 is what's the moral of the story? What's the transformation? What's the one takeaway that you want the listener to have? In my case, is invest in yourself. And it's invest yourself when you don't even have to. That's the key. That's what makes people, that's the difference between someone who is unsuccessful and someone who is successful, right? Over the years, I've learned people who need the information don't seem to be seeking it. Guess who are the ones who don't invest in information? The ones who are struggling financially. The ones who are successful, we are always investing in ourselves. So that's the moral of the story. So 3 secrets to brilliant storytelling. So comment below, tell me how you're gonna apply this. Next time, maybe you are close.
Okay, so basically the point was invest in yourself is what he wanted to say. And he took 5 minutes to say that with a story. So it started off with, he did not even talk about saying I was presenting, I bought everybody, but he said sitting in the front row, sitting in that. So that's where you are hooking up the audience. Now, why is he talking about sitting in the front row, taking notes? After all, that's what we do when we listen. But the point is he's trying to hook on. And that one statement, invest in yourself, we would have just let it loose. But now why are we remembering invest in yourself? Because he gave the story. And finally, he said the 3 bullet points, which was what was relating to whatever I've been saying as 6, wherein we set the context, we give the content, we take it. So ultimately, that is where you will land up in. So this is exactly what happens in a storytelling. Now, this is exactly what happens in a storytelling. So typically, I'll probably use this as an example here. I've been called to do the storytelling session. That came up because I have a brand. Then what happens is I will have to get the buy-in of the audience to listen to me. So the first one is the ethos. What we call as ethos is my credibility as a speaker. The pathos that comes in this we call as a rhetorical triangle. So the pathos that we talk about here is the audience emotions. So what am I trying to do? I need to be able to understand my audience emotions. Now that is becoming all the more important in these kinds of online sessions where I won't see the audience. So I don't see the emotions. That's why on and off I ask you to type out, say 1, say 0 and all that, that comes in. Once I am able to relate to the audience, after that, whatever I say, audience will not even verify. It is a fact and figure. They believe in me. That's exactly what happened even here. If you really look at it, in this example, in this video, if you look at it, initially he set the hook. Now, why is he talking? He was a speaker, then he's talking about this. So what does he mean? Later on, we realize, okay, this is what it is. This is the essence. So that is exactly what we call as a rhetorical triangle, which is very important in a storytelling. So back again to summarize, the point that I'm trying to talk about here as a storytelling is, as I was answering to Mr. NCV, I do not want the storytelling to be something which is a quality to be available with person A, with person B who are into this kind of a role and all that. You're all storytellers. I'm sure I started off saying this at 4 o'clock when I started the session, and again at 5:30, I'm saying we are all storytellers. And the number of nods that I had at 4 versus now, I'm sure would have increased manifold, multifold. The reason is we all recognize the fact that we tell a story wherever, whenever, whatever comes in. But what are we talking about in a business storytelling is not fiction. It's not horror. It is to the point, and that is where we talk about this kind of things, your hoop meet payoff or your rags to riches or whatever the situation, opportunity and all that. So ultimately, you are able to achieve what you want to in terms of your selling. Now, selling, I don't necessarily mean a product selling or a service selling. It also means selling your thought process to your team member, selling your thought process to your project coordinator, selling your thought process to your peers, wherever, whatever, day in and day out in every aspect. We are talking about a lot of stories, and all that I tried to do today was nudge you around in terms of what you already have been doing, relate you to some of those, and give you some technical terms like the dopamines and all those stuff, mirrorings and all that, so that you realize, yes, nothing wrong in telling a story, but if it is a lie, it is wrong. But if it is something which is able to enable the audience to relate well, emote the same emotions that I have, then I am fine and I will be a successful storyteller. That is the essence of what I wanted to give you today as an overview. I will pause here. Over to you. Ask your questions on the chat box and I will be happy to answer them. Anybody, any questions? Good question, Sundarvari sir. With your experience, have you ever met anyone who hates stories? Nobody will be it children or old people. We will not hate stories. But what is important is, I understand where you're coming from. Hating a story can happen if you are not able to choose the right kind of a story situation for a scenario. So the context setting, the time and the situation that we are talking about should relate well. If you're going to sell a product that is going to help you store addresses in the address book and then talk something about flying in the air, they will not relate. So they won't like, what is the story got to do with the selling? So the key is to relate it, but at the top of the level for the question, I don't think there is anyone who will hate a story. But the deeper question behind that question that you have stated is, the answer is the context setting is very important for the story, which means I as a presenter must necessarily know who the audience is. And only when I know the audience, I will be able to pick a story that will relate to them. Thanks, Sundarvari. Which is your favorite story and what you like most about it? Well, Onam, that's a very open question. I like quite a lot of things for quite a lot of the situations. Like, for example, in the recent past, Indra Nooyi's biography is something that I love because there is so much of learning that comes in. But at the same time, when I want to have a break, I will talk about it now, just a minute. When I want a break, when I've been exhausted and I need a break, I would probably love to read a Tom and Jerry. I would probably love to read a Tom and Jerry or view a Tom and Jerry rather than anything else. So those are some of the things that comes in. Okay, now to your question on that rhetorical triangle, all that I mean to say is knowing the audience. The first thing is know the audience, relate with them. See, when I come in as a speaker, you have somebody from the college introducing me, there is some brand for me. That is what technically we call as ethos. Then you expect something out of me. So the first step is, may not be today, but especially more importantly, last Thursday, when the first time I'm meeting you, though I spoke on the day one, I came in late and I was asked to, Mr. Ramanan had to pause and then I had to talk and all that. So you might think, what is this guy? He comes in late, stops somebody and then talks, and is he so big? Then when you see me talking on the passion, I had a brand. So you got a brand there. So now I am relating it with you, relating to you. So I need to understand who you are so that I'm setting the context accordingly. That is called as a pathos in the rhetorical triangle. And finally, after that, whatever I say, however I say, how can I get into it, or whatever I say, the facts and the figures that I make will automatically be accepted by you because I have been able to relate with you, because you're able to mirror me. I am able to mirror you when I am talking about it. That is where it comes. Hope that answered Nava. Tanya, that's a good question. What if somebody isn't interested in reading books? How can we encourage someone to read books? See, very frankly put, encouraging someone comes in only when you know why they are discouraged in doing it. So the first and foremost is we need to figure out why are they not reading books. Now, probably because that person is someone who wants to be active, that he doesn't want to sit in a one place and read, then maybe allow him to go through audiobooks. So the read alouds in the books will come in, so he'll be able to do it. As I was answering Sundar Bharati sir, I don't think anybody will hate stories. It's more because they will feel, they will probably feel that's a waste of time in terms of the business that he gets into. He wouldn't have understood this kind of a concept. So the point is, when somebody is discouraged or somebody is not interested in doing something, let us first try to go deeper in terms of why they are not interested. You'll automatically get an answer there. That's how you'll have to relate. Hope that answered, though direct, not a direct question.
So can I say something regarding this? When how to encourage someone? So like someone said, if somebody is not interested in reading books, it not just with like reading books, even with listening to music, a certain genre of music, a certain artist. I think this happens because initially everyone, even as a kid, we read books, we listen to stories, poems, etc. But as we grow up, sometimes when we get more into things, like as a kid, obviously we read such interesting stories, everything is interesting and fascinating for us. But when we grow up, sometimes when we start that whole phase, be it reading novels or just articles, etc., sometimes when you don't get good recommendations initially, when you're not that knowledgeable, sometimes you don't get that much good recommendations, and that is why you start to think, oh no, this is not my cup of tea, it's not good, it's not interesting, it's boring. So I think this is the core problem, maybe I would say, along with one's personal interest, obviously.
You're right. But it is easier to address it if you know why are they doing it, because the one side is all of us are used to saying the good part of it for them to do it. But we also need to look at it from the other side. That's where the empathy comes in. The more you tell stories, the more you will empathize with others. So you'll be able to put yourself in other shoes to understand why they are not able to do something. And that's where you will be less argumentative, but you will start throwing more facts. That's where it goes. Thanks, Vidhi, for adding. Anybody else, anything else that you want to ask? Feel free, open. If there is nothing else, back to you for the closure, organizers. Okay, what challenges can storytellers face in the fast-moving, over-practical world? Mita, let me reiterate, storytellers are not another role. All of us are storytellers. So each one of us have our own challenges. Now, what is important in a fast-moving world or a slow-moving world is call to action. Now, the key is how are we achieving a call to action? So how are we achieving the call to action? If you really look at it, if you have 5 minutes, let's take the same introduction that I was talking about. If you have 5 minutes, and you'll have to introduce yourself versus 20 minutes to introduce yourself. It's only the timing. So you need to be ready. We call the elevator pitch and all that, right? Something like that. We need to be ready for every situation. So if somebody says, I don't have time, can you do this alone? Fine. You'll have to be able to tell them that. If somebody says, I does not talk about it, then probably give them a lot more. So the level of depth of story that you get into or the context setting that you get into will get altered depending on the nature of the audience, timing and all that. That's why we call it as a context setting. Hope that answers me. Story is practical. I do not want to take it outside because I'm not talking about fiction stories here. Just to point on the practical world, my stories are what I have experienced, what I have seen others experience, how it is going to help. That's the essence that you need to keep in mind, right? Anybody else, anything else? Back to you, organizers. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Thank you, sir. I completely agree when you say, no, we all are storytellers. And I agree with that, but I also feel that it is a very important tool which we use to convey our thoughts, our ideas to the world or the
Exactly.
people in front of us.
Very true.
And it is, this art is something which we can learn. And I really want to thank you for one thing. When you when you started your session, and in the middle of the session, you said, see, I just did that once upon a time and all that. So you were actually telling us these are the techniques, use it if you really want to learn it. So
Exactly.
that is something which I really like, that you told us that hidden thing also, ki ye hai, that technique ye hai, if you want to use, you can use it. So thank you for that. And you weave the whole session on storytelling in a beautiful manner. So thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wants to comment or any other question?
Okay, Rashmita, how much storytelling process helps introverts? Now, see, the problem that we will probably look at in terms of an introvert is, am I a person who can talk to a unknown person openly, very easily? So if we are able to relate well with them, that is where storytelling helps. Now, the story is not a generic story that we try to bring in. Depending on the kind of audience that we are trying to have, we are getting into it. So the point is, if I'm able to relate well, he will open out. If I'm not able to, he will not open out. Talk to a counselor, for example. Some counselors are successful because they relate well with you. They tell you exactly what you want. Some counselors are not, because they try to move around or try to sell, but do not talk about what your requirement is. So coming back to your point, if I'm able to relate well with the introvert, he will be able to open out faster. Sometimes if you look at it, he may be an introvert, but with one person, he will talk very well because he is able to relate and mirror himself. So that's the thing that you need to keep in mind. Are you able to put yourself in his shoes and think? The moment he recognizes that, he will open out. That's how you'll have to look at it. Hope that answered. Anything else?
See any other questions? So I would now request Ms. Nirmala Monidhar to give the formal vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bhanu Kumar. It's been a journey, entire journey that you have taken us through. And I do agree with you that we are all storytellers, be it a child who weaves an imaginary story of having a conversation with a lion when he's coming to the play school, or, saying something which is totally unbelievable for an adult, but for the child, it's an imaginary story. Yes, you said that you didn't want to say, you didn't want to put it in a slot whereby that according to you, everybody is a storyteller. That I agree with you totally. But I think some of us deliver a story with a lot of punch. I see certain members of my family who are able to narrate even a mundane incident that happens on a day-to-day basis in such a in such a manner that everybody is glued to them, listening to them as to what they are saying. So I think probably they are gifted, and they have the gift of the gab, or whatever you call it. They are able to hold the attention, and the same thing may be narrated in a very flat manner by another person. So some people have it in them naturally to pull it off, and some people have to make an effort to keep the audience going.
We'll have to keep nurturing it.
Yeah, nurturing it. And some people are gifted. It comes to them very naturally. They
Agreed,
can hold
agreed.
an audience. And what I was very fascinated about is we do a lot of storytelling, because many of us here are from human development and child development background, and we talk about importance of storytelling in a child's life, and how to develop curiosity, imagination, fantasy, and all that. But I was very intrigued when you connected it with the brain activity. That is something that was very fascinating for me, the neural coupling and the mirroring, and how we relate it to our experience and things like that. And another thing which I really found to be very, very impressive was you did not diminish the role of the storyteller. In your entire journey, the storyteller was very important. And the manner in which, because very often, even in a street play for that matter, the sutradhar who connects the sequences, how effective he or she is, makes or breaks the whole play.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a drama or a sequence of events or whatever it is. So being from a psychology background, I was really intrigued by the brain part. You linked it to the brain, you linked it to ethos, you linked it to emotions, and you name it, you linked it to everything possible in our everyday life. And I really liked the way you went ahead with the story curve. Any movie you go to, the curve is followed. And of course, there are lots of fights and misunderstandings and crying and everything. And in the end, it is all, and they lived happily ever after. So that kind of a thing. And it was a very long day for all of us today because we had so many meetings and admission cutoffs and all. But believe me, I'm feeling refreshed after your session on storytelling.
Thank you.
And am I glad that we had this session today, because it was so light and refreshing, and it brought back so many childhood memories when grandma used to make all of us sit in a circle and feed us food and keep telling us stories, and we would not even realize that we are eating all the veggies which we would otherwise not eat.
Some of the niceties of joint family.
We just were so fascinated by the story that
Absolutely.
anything would be taken care of. So thank you so much. Heartfelt gratitude to you for a wonderful session as always. And no amount of thanks from us can compensate for the amount of effort you have put in structuring the course, designing the course, giving suggestions, giving your valuable inputs. And we'll always be indebted to you for that. And I hope that the participants, realize that our speakers, our resource persons who come here are not just delivering a talk. They are doing a lot of background work for you. They are, assembling things from various places. They are putting it into context. They're constantly checking with me, what is the audience like? What do they like and what do they not like? What is the target group like? So there's a lot that they have to put in terms of efforts. I would like all of you to appreciate the effort and the time that they are giving us. It's not just about getting up and switching on the laptop and delivering a lecture, because I know Mr. Bhanu Kumar was working on his PPT till 3:20 p.m. today. Because when I sent him a message, he said he was still giving the finishing touches to the PPT. So what I'm trying to say here is that so much effort and so much time and so much interest that they are taking in the participants are kindly reciprocate it by taking away things from these sessions. I hope you'll imbibe them. I hope you'll use them and put them into context and make it really relevant for yourselves in your lives. That would really satisfy us, because that would really be mission accomplished as far as we are concerned. And by we, I mean our 3 course coordinators, Dr. Ruby Bhardwaj, Prerna Butta, and myself. We felt the need for a life skills course. We brought it to you. We got the best people who actually sat down and worked it out with us. So thank you, Mr. Bhanu Kumar, once again from my end. And thank you all the participants. Thank you, Mr. N.C. Balachandran, who's the facilitator for this course. Without him, we couldn't have moved forward and got the best people here. And I'm glad, because there is a flip side to COVID. We could get resource persons from outside Delhi. Delhi, we are always covering, and now we got a chance to go down south and get people from Chennai, Bangalore, and other places. And it's been such a pleasure working with all of you. And I've been coordinating with you at different levels, and we are so happy. And I'm sure we'll take this journey forward. And thanks to all the faculty members from other colleges and students for participating in this course. Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone, and stay safe. Thank you.
May we request everyone to please switch on your cameras?
Yeah. Clap, 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 Suparna.
Vidhi, have you taken the screenshots?
Yes, ma'am, I'm taking it. Just a second.
आराम से करो. We got a vaccination done.
Okay, ma'am, we're done with pictures.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Meet
you,
on
Mr.
Tuesday.
Bhanu Kumar,
Thank you. Meet you
for
on
yet
Tuesday. Bye-bye.
another wonderful session. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Meet again on Tuesday. Bye-bye.
So such a refreshing.
Sure, looking forward, sir.
Thank you.
Same here.
Yeah, thank you,
Bye-bye.
Mr. Bharakabat. This is
Thank you,
Balachandran.
sir.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you.
Great session, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I was so dead tired, I can't tell you. I thought I won't pull through this session, but it was so refreshing. Such a pleasure. Mr. Sundarabharti, good evening. I just saw you on the screen.
Good evening, ma'am.
We look forward to the session on time management.
The same here, ma'am. Can't wait.
Same here. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am. Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Stay safe. Bye-bye. Thank you, Prerna. Thank you. I think everybody's filled the feedback.